Heat illness describes these three categories: heat stress, heat exhaustion, and heat stroke. So you have a child who's been running around outside on a very hot day, and it's not just hot, it's humid. Because temperature is not the only factor. Humidity is another factor, wind chill in the winter is another factor. So they have these great diagrams that show what the temperature is versus what the humidity is, or versus the temperature versus the wind chill, and then when you're kind of in the danger zones for having kids spend way too much time outdoors. When you have a high, what's called heat index, because of the high temperature and high humidity, that puts a lot of stress on the body. The body tries to cool itself, and other factors are things like acclimatization, which is early in the season, the risk for heat illness, even at lower temperatures, is higher than in the middle of the season when the temperatures get higher, the middle of the summer season. If you have a child who's running around playing, which kids love to do outside, and let's say it's sunny, which adds another factor of exposing them to lots of heat, then they can progress from the mild heat illness, called heat stress, into what's called heat exhaustion. In heat exhaustion, the child may start sweating a lot more. Because of that sweat, their skin, it may feel really either hot or really cold sometimes. They can have changes in behavior, can start during that time, become kind of irritable, not behaving themselves. At this point, their mechanisms for controlling their body temperature are starting to break down. Their clothes become soaked because of the sweat, and then it traps that kind of heat against their body. They have all this warm moisture against their body now, and they're not releasing as much heat. It can progress even more to the point where they start vomiting, becoming nauseous, maybe even becoming dizzy. And at that point, you may recognize them running around and see that they become kind of clumsy. In infants, you may not recognize these symptoms as easily. They may simply be turning, very, red and sweaty, maybe breathing a little bit faster to try to compensate for some of that. But remember, the younger the kids are, the less ability they have to control their own environments. So it really becomes dependent on adults caring for these children to make adjustments to the environment that will then allow them to start cooling down. So when it progresses beyond heat exhaustion, then we get into heat stroke. Heat stroke is a complete breakdown of the body's ability to thermoregulate. So when you have a child who has heat exhaustion, which is that middle category, which is that moderate heat illness, their body temperature may be as high as 104. But in heat stroke, it goes above 104 and it starts getting out of control. They can no longer reduce that body temperature on their own. They need help. They really need help from the environment. In addition, other things start happening. When you feel them, they feel very dry because they're not sweating anymore. At this point, they could be very dehydrated. Dehydration progresses throughout all of heat illness to get to the severe form. And as a result, the blood volume drops. The heart starts trying to work harder. So they could be bright red at that point, or even very, very pale, because they're starting to go the direction where their heart just can't keep up with the need to try to perfuse the entire body. Here, it's not just a little bit of confusion and clumsiness. This is where children who are experiencing heat stroke, if they're still conscious, become completely irrational. Before they progress to unconsciousness, it's really important to get them into a cool environment and to call 911.